Stab, 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 stab. Hey, what are you doing up there, buddy? Stab, 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 stab. Can't reload enough. Do you remember when I said this the last time that we played with this Voodoo 2? My other idea was I was going to install Ubuntu, use virt-manager and KVM and pass this through to a Windows 98 virtual machine and use it that way. I think that would be quite cool too. Well, friends, I did the thing. I did all of the things. I got it to work and I documented absolutely everything and streamlined the entire process so you can do it for yourself and you can grab it from our GitHub and possibly find a motherboard that's compatible with doing this. So if you're a retro gaming nerd like me, you can have some fun with your old 3DFX hardware. Let's do a Voodoo 2 virtualized thing. This is so sick, guys. I can't believe we got this to work. Check this out. Through the week, I've been tinkering with this in my spare time, and last night I was up to, I don't even know what time it was, just ironing out all of the kinks with trying to make this whole process as smooth as possible. There's a whole stack of prerequisites that you need to kind of follow to get this work, but they're not as strict as you think. One of the main things that I discovered with doing this whole thing is virtualizing Windows 98 can be very, very difficult if you don't go about it the right way. I've got a Windows image that you can load in with the configuration that I made for virt-manager to make your life completely easy. If you really wanted to, you probably could use something like VMware ESXi. The one thing that you're missing out on is the rest of the desktop experience for troubleshooting and doing config things. So even if you were to use something like Proxmox, I wouldn't recommend it. I would stick with one of a few different operating systems. I've got all the packages you need to install to get started as commands up on our GitHub. That's for Ubuntu and Debian, for Fedora, and also for Arch Linux if that's what you use, because Arch Linux, by the way. A recurring comment that I saw on the first part was, what test bench is that? This is the Streetcom Open Bench Table. This is the first version of the case. This isn't the latest one. It is not cheap. This will set you back in Australian dollars, maybe $150 to $180. In fact, if you're new here, we've done a review on these open bench tables before, and down there, you see that thing down there? It's the description. I'll put a link to one of those reviews if you're interested. I've done a fair bit of testing with some other PCI accelerators and PCI graphics cards. And one thing that I've discovered with using virt-manager and KVM is it can be quite finicky getting this to work as your primary graphics card or GPU or adapter in Windows 98. Essentially what happens is with Windows 98, it's not very clever. They never really intended the operating system to run with multiple graphics cards. Yeah, you can do multiple outputs, but using two graphics cards can be very confusing for the operating system. So I can get this to detect in Windows 98 and install the drivers, but I can't get it to initialize. Even if I disable graphics on the virtual machine, which is basically used for console access, it doesn't initialize the card. It just doesn't turn on at all. I've tested this with a couple cards. I did most of my testing with the S3 Verge DX, basically because this is known, as Phil's Computer Lab has said,
infamously, it is called the 3D decelerator.
And I thought it'd be funny to include this in the video, but yeah, it just doesn't work for now. I do have another plan for this, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that, because I do have another way that I'm going to get this to work, and that'll also be on GitHub when I decide to get around to sharing all that with you. Okay, let me show you how to get this up and running in Ubuntu 24.04. Again, this guide will apply to other distros as long as you're using virt-manager with QEMU and KVM. I'm not going to go through and teach you guys how to install a Linux distro. That one is up to you. This guide will apply to most common Linux distros, or rather most popular Linux distros. So there is that. On GitHub, it will help you get all the packages you need for major distros. So let's head on over to the GitHub page for the project so I can show you a little bit of what is going on here. So first of all, you know, GitHub, you know how it works. Essentially what I've done here, basically I've created a wiki for things you need to look out for. So what we've got here is some prerequisites. If there's any spelling mistakes, it's just because I've been rushing to get this done. Modern motherboard with a PCI slot, pretty obvious. Compatible PCI 3D effects adapter. As well as that, you need a motherboard that supports virtualization. So any AMD board or Intel board with VTD or IOMMU should be okay. You need to enable that in the BIOS. I'll show you how to enable that in the BIOS, just in case you don't know where the settings are in your BIOS. This will apply to this Gigabyte board specifically. Not every board, but the options are generally the same. So we'll give this a quick reboot so I can give you an idea of how this works. Hopefully you can see all of this. Most BIOSes have a search function these days. We're looking for VTD and you'll want to have that enabled, right? You want to have virtualization enabled as well. And VMX is turned on for this CPU. So those are not optional. This needs to be enabled. As mentioned, there are many ways to install this. Basically, I've included a couple commands for each distro that I think people are going to use to do this with. So we've got Debian and Ubuntu, we've got Fedora and Red Hat and Arch Linux because, yeah, what else would you use, right? I've added a list of boards that I think will probably be compatible, including a bunch of AMD boards. I have reached out to a bunch of these motherboard vendors to get some of them so we can test. Obviously, the known working board is the board that I've got here, and the known working card that is confirmed working is the Creative Labs 3D Blaster Voodoo 2 that I have here. There's also a bunch of other things that I want to do with the project, and I want to make automated install scripts just to make your life a bit easier, so you never have to write a single character into any command line or terminal. I just want that to be something, because not everyone is as technically savvy as most Linux users, right? And this is not just for Linux users. This is for people who love gaming in general. Let's say, for instance, all the packages are installed. What to do next? Well, the first thing we want to do is load virt-manager. This is where it gets a little bit spicy. So first of all, what you'll want to do is you'll want to create a new virtual machine. The way to do this, you just go manual install. And the funny thing about this is we're not going to use any of these settings. This is just to get you up and running. So I'm going to type in Windows 98, and with virt-manager, it's like, hey, we don't really support that. So you include end-of-life operating systems, then we'll select Windows 98. We don't have to worry about any of these settings. Trust me, that's what GitHub's for. This stuff doesn't matter either. We're just going to go through and do all of this. This is basically to create a template machine so we can deploy our own custom file to it, which is actually not what's going to happen. You'll see this is a really strange trick that you can do with virt-manager. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to the repo and we want to open KVM 98 3dfx.xml. You can either do a git pull this locally. It depends on how you want to do it, but the easiest way is just to open it in GitHub and do a raw copy of the data. And then what we'll do is we'll open up virt-manager and we'll want to edit one of these preferences. This is very important. Otherwise, it won't let us do whatever we need to do. So we'll go edit preferences and we'll go enable XML editing. Otherwise, this will not work, right? I'm going to automate all this with the script anyway, just to make your life easier. But for now, this is how we're doing it. We'll want to open that virtual machine. We'll want to click on the show virtual machine details. And then you'll see in the overview, there's an XML tab. I want to explain how this XML works before we make any changes. So I'll just open up Sublime Text. I'll paste the XML in here. We'll change this to, where is it? XML. And we'll just go through this really quickly as possible. What's going to happen is the second you paste this and deploy it with virt-manager, it's going to delete all the comments. So we need to assign a UUID first of all. And what I'd recommend is just changing the last number or any numbers in the string. We'll just change it to 9, I suppose. The next thing is you don't need to change memory allocation. This chipset is kind of hidden in virt-manager and I don't know why it's not exposed, or maybe there's a way to do it and I'm just an idiot. The CPU type is very important here. Now, if you decide to use Core 2 Duo, it becomes very unstable, although it can be faster. Yeah, Windows doesn't like it. You usually get protection errors with memory protection and stuff. So we use Pentium 3 just for compatibility. The 32-bit version of QEMU works the best and you don't get, well, I can't say you don't get any, but you get less protection errors overall. Also, there is a disk image, which I will supply. Basically, what you need to do is put the path to this image into this config file before you deploy it. Obviously, KVM 98 3dfx.img is what I called it, just to make it easy. Inside of the Windows 98 image that is part of the project for this, I decided not to make it an install-based image and basically a ready-to-go image. You can just drop it straight in and you're good to go. I've got to acknowledge this though, this is based on the Windows 98 Quick Install project with a lot of customization that I did for running the virtual machine in this way. And most of the customization I did was to do with drivers and the way devices detect, because it's not perfect, but it's as fast as we can get it to run this way. The other thing that I made that's kind of cool, and it kind of gets around some of the things you need to dance around with copying files into a Windows 98 virtual machine. I created a blank ISO file, and you can open this in File Roller or any archive manager, and you can just drop files in and then mount that ISO to the virtual machine. I think that's pretty cool. There's also networking. I got networking completely working. It should work out of the box. If you have issues, just let us know or just like comment somewhere. Also, I've done native graphics, which will work in up to 1024x7 68 from memory in full 32-bit color for the virtual machine. I've got the configuration for my Voodoo 2 that's passed through. This will work with any PCI device, but make sure you check what the PCI ID is with either LSPCI, or manually remove this once you've added it and then add it back in. All this other stuff doesn't really matter. Okay, it's got a lot of performance tweaks and stuff in this as well, so it should be all good to go. If you do have improvements, feel free to fork the project on GitHub and make your own additions, or if you want to contribute to the project as well, just reach out to me on Twitter and maybe I can include you as a contributor. Maybe we can work on this together as making this, let's call it one of the coolest modern 3dfx projects out there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to want to deploy that XML file. This is before launching the virtual machine, right? We'll also need to grab a copy of the disk image and the ISO from the GitHub as well. So we'll just paste this. It looks a bit weird. The second I hit apply, look what happens to all of the comments and this virtual machine. Ready? Apply and nothing. We need to go back to the virtual machine manager, and then you'll notice there's a new virtual machine called KVM 98 3dfx. If we open this one, we can inspect all of the hardware changes here, and you can see that the PCI device here is available. You want to leave ROM bar enabled for this as well. There's not much difference in performance, but just have it on anyway, because it's just about how the kernel allocates certain resources to the device. This is the thing that I think is the most interesting, and it's the data.iso file. And this will allow us to copy files into the virtual machine. I'll show you how this works. This is a very hacky way to do it. If I open up my doc, I've just got a whole bunch of stuff. I've just been working on this quite a lot. Open with, and we're going to open this with File Roller. You'll see it's just a straight up empty ISO file. Let's say you've got a bunch of 3dfx demos in a folder. You can then just drag that into File Roller and it'll throw it into the ISO and you're ready to go. When you boot up the machine, it's all going to be good to go. So the next thing you'll want to be aware of is the size of the disk image. I chose 4 gig just for compatibility's sake. If you wanted to, you could expand this, and we might do a version of the image that includes a lot more. But the Windows 98 image that I built for this has all the 3dfx demos built in, so you can get to testing the second that you launch it. That's mainly all you need to know about this. I don't think I'm missing anything. Let's launch it and show you guys exactly how this works, okay? So it's booting straight into the virtual machine with the disk image that I've created, and you can change this to scale the display just so it's a little bit bigger, and we are launched into the virtual machine. The quirks are strange, and it's to do with virt-manager and the way it handles USB hubs. Essentially, one of the hubs just won't work, so I've had to disable it. But other than that, you can see networking is installed. You can change the monitor if you want to go higher resolutions. The display adapter is installed. This is a QEMU one. The most important thing is we've got Fast Voodoo 2 4.6 installed as the driver for the card. This is probably the most stable Voodoo 2 driver for this type of use, right? And I've done quite a bit of testing, and yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is audio in the virtual machine. It will output the audio directly to whatever your primary audio interface is on your host machine, which is kind of why I talked about you not using a hypervisor that isn't desktop based. Otherwise there's going to be no point. You're not going to hear anything. And the Realtek AC97 codec was the best option for this from a whole bunch of testing. I did test every other combination you can imagine, and this just seems to be the most stable. There's a few other performance tweaks that I made to this as well. In the hard disk setting, DMA is enabled. It's also enabled for the CD-ROM device too. You get a bit of hitching if you don't have this enabled. So if it's not enabled for some reason in your image, just go ahead and enable DMA. I know I'm racing through this because next thing I wanted to show you quickly was internet connectivity. I'm just going to make this as easy as possible. We can just go ping 8.8.8 and you can see we can ping out to Google with no issues. As well as that, I've updated a whole bunch of the software inside of this image. Got the latest compatible version of Internet Explorer with FrogFriend. Shout out to Action Retro. Awesome channel. Subscribe to Action Retro if you haven't seen this channel before. As well as that, I've got a whole bunch of 3D effect stuff like some demos and whatnot. And that's it. That's basically it. I made this as clean as possible so you could do whatever you wanted with this. There's no extra fluff, nothing that you don't need, and everything that you do need. I guess you want to know if this really works. Okay, I've got a multicam set up. I've got the big black magic in my hand, and I'm going to do this live. I'm going to launch Donut, and I'm going to hit record on the black magic so you can see this in action. Hopefully this little monitor, hey, there it is. Beautiful. And there you go, ladies and gents, it works. Yay. In a virtual machine. How insanely cool is that? Yay. And it works very well. And in fact, the frame rates are insanely good. Let me show you some gameplay so you can see it in action. The frame rates are looking excellent. You can see the frame rate on the right-hand side now. It shows it a lot more consistently than it did when we did the first video, but this is running absolutely beautifully right now. Mouse sensitivity is a bit how you're going because, yeah, I just didn't bother to set it, but you can see, oh, you're going to get blown up by a rocket. Whoa, run, oh. Got my own rockets now. I keep pressing shift because, and all the other buttons because I'm an idiot. Oh man, this is running really nicely. 800 by 600 is running really, really good. I decided to start capturing this in as close to native resolution as possible and then scaling it up. So we get the proper 4:3 aspect ratio because that's something that you guys requested from the last video as well, is that you wanted to see gameplay and stuff in 4:3. Right. Here's a trick with this gun if you don't know it. You can do the alt fire, then you can shoot it and it blows it up. Very hard to time, but it's very cool. I don't know why I'm sharing that with you guys. I don't know. You've all probably played this, but if you didn't know, yeah, there's some really cool alt fire combinations you can do. See if I can hit one. Yeah, see? It's really cool. You can also get headshots with these. Let's see if we can get one. Get some health packs going. See? Headshot with that too. Sweet. This is running really good, guys. I'm very happy with this. Let's check out 640 by 480 because I'm curious. All right. 640 by 480. The frame rate is much higher. Much higher. Wow, this feels much better. This mouse and keyboard sucks, by the way. I'm using like some random Microsoft wireless thing to do this. But yeah, this is running so good. Oh, this is sick. I really like this. The problem is, if I make videos like this, I get kind of lost.
Killing spree.
Wish I could do like a...
I'm under heavy attack.
Imagine. It's not Call of Duty, mate. So there you go. You can see Unreal Tournament runs much better now. This is incredibly cool. I love that this works so well. Hell yeah. On Windows 98, it f***ing slaps in a virtual machine. I'm just going to put it out there. It's insane. It is way more performant. And it's got a lot to do with the way that Glide works in a native version of an operating system, right? We had a couple comments from people saying maybe VSync is an issue. Actually, it wasn't. There was a lot of testing I did prior to making the first video, and that's why I said I took 20 hours to tinker with everything to make sure the performance was as good as possible. And the performance was all over the place with most of the things we tested, except Unreal Tournament was quite consistent because it natively used Glide and not MiniGL. So yeah, good work to me, I suppose, for making it work a bit better. But really, Unreal Tournament is a title that doesn't even support VSync as it is because it came out before VSync was a thing. So here's what surprised me even more than that. All right, back to Quake II. I don't know what settings I've got set up here. Let's just double check. Okay, 640 by 480. Let's do time demo 1 and then map demo 1.dm2, and let's run this first, right? Get an idea. Right. Okay. Almost there. 71.7 FPS compared to whatever the other one is on your screen right now for the Windows 10 machine. Okay, let's change the resolution really quickly just to get this one out of the way nice and quick. Let's go. Looking really good. This is looking really good. All right. 58.9 is so much better than it was in Windows 10. That's crazy. So the issue that I had with the USB and the mouse tracking before was really to do with how Windows 10 synchronizes USB with weird devices, and yeah, it was a bit of an issue, but not really that big of an issue. It was just for testing. But in Windows 98, in a virtual machine, look how good this runs. Input's great. My aim is terrible because this isn't Call of Duty and it doesn't have the movement that I'm used to. There's no slide canceling. I can't do any of the fun stuff that I usually do. But yeah, this works really well. Man, this is impressive. Computer update. Okay, be quiet, you. Yeah, this is running really good. This is so good. This is much better than it was. So much better. So much more playable. Movement's not that bad. Get some bunny hopping going. Get some speed happening. I love the movement in this game. It gets progressively faster as well. So good. I think the way that Quake works, you correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it uses a combination of hit scan and raycasting for bullets. Modern Call of Duty games have about 300 milliseconds for hit scan, and then the rest of it is actual bullet physics. So yeah, that's me being a bit of a nerd, but also, again, correct me if I'm wrong, which I probably am, or maybe I'm completely right. Who knows? Quake 2, very impressive play now. It runs well. Okay, let's jump on over to Return to Castle Wolfenstein and see what the dealio is. One thing we don't have is sound for some reason. That's pretty odd. Oh, why is there no sound? That's very odd. I'll make the sounds myself. I got a knife. Walking through the door. This guy's like, oh, I'm saying some stuff. Stab, 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 stab. And open this other door, run up the stairs, and there's going to be a guy who's going to be like, hey, what are you doing up there, buddy? Stab, 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 stab. I got a gun. That's it, right? And then this guy's like, hey, what are you doing? And then I'm like, yo. And then I got a knife. The sound a knife makes is stab, 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 stab. Right. The frame rate here is about the same as what we saw with it running in Windows 10, but the stability is so much better. We're not getting weird frame drops. Everything's running quite nicely. It's not the best experience, but it gives you a bit of an idea of what something that runs on Quake 3's engine is like. That's not Quake 3, if that makes sense. So 640 by 480 is fine. Right, while we've got the opportunity, we'll change the resolution. Oh, that was 800 by 600. My bad, 800 by 600. 640 by 480. Pick up the gun. See what's happening. It's my walking sound in my walking boots. Where is this evil Professor Dr. Man guy? Run up to him. Stab, 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 stab. Open this. Go up the stairs. Whole bunch of these guys up here. I wonder if we can get a headshot. Stab, 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 stab in the face. I picked up his gun, but I still want to stab, 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 stab. Come back here. Let me do the thing. Stab. Ah! Stop running away. Why can't I stab you easily? Okay, fine. I'm going to have to get the little bit of a... Can't reload a knife, Nick. Come on, mate. All right, here we go. Get one last stabby stab. Look at the frame rate. It's almost hitting 60. Oh, it drops when we go outside. When we look around, oh, it's actually not too bad. And then open the door, and then it's like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Got the COD movement going. Oh, no, stab. Okay, that's it. Return to Castle Wolfenstein also performs much better. No surprises there. If you've got questions about anything that I've shown in the video, drop a comment down below, but I also want to hear from you guys again. I still want to know for the people who haven't seen the other video, if you haven't, go back and watch that now, then come back to this part of the video. What was your first experience playing games with 3D accelerated hardware, and what did it feel like? I talked in the comments on the replies a little bit about my first experience because I couldn't remember at the time, but it came back to me. My first experience using a Voodoo 2 and it essentially changing the way that I saw gaming was I had Quake and I had GL Quake in Windows 95, and one of the things I did was, well, actually the first thing I did that really made me realize this was something special because it looked a bit better than software mode and did all these other things, was I set the transparency of the water and I could see through the water, and I thought that was the most epic thing that I had ever seen. Back then, believe it or not, Nintendo 64 emulators were not terrible. They weren't the best, but I remember playing Super Mario 64 on my Voodoo 2 as well. It was maybe only 2 or 3 years after it came out on N64. That's how I played the game. I didn't have a Nintendo 64. I played it in an emulator. You know, those were different times. That was the Wild West back then. As I've said earlier in the video, anything that I've mentioned or any technical piece of information will be over on the GitHub project page for this project. And the truth is, I kind of want people to help out with this if you can. Like if you've got time and if it's something you've got interest in, and if you've got hardware that you want to test, or even if you have hardware you want to donate to me so I can test and add to that as well. But be aware that this is like a side project for me to kind of make my brain do something a little bit different in tech, because it's been YouTube for the past 6 or 7 years. And it feels good to be really excited about something again. It's been a long time since I had this feeling. And we have this whole channel to run. We have Computex coming up in a couple of weeks where we'll be going to Taiwan for a bit. We've got heaps of videos scheduled to film over there. So we're going to be very, very busy little bees for the next, I don't even know, the next month or so. But there'll be lots of videos between now and the next time you see us talk about this on the channel. There's a list of motherboards I put over on the project wiki that should technically support this. I've put in requests with a whole bunch of motherboard vendors to see if we can get some of those boards so we can validate them for ourselves, do a video on the validation process, and then update the wiki because people will want to know. And this is the great thing about doing what I do here on YouTube. With projects like this, traditionally, it's very hard to get your hands on hardware to validate and test with, but because of what I do, we're a PC tech channel, the vendors that I've spoke to so far are very interested in this project. So let us know your thoughts on all of that down below in the comments and click the GitHub for more info. As far as running KVM in Linux with the Voodoo 2 passed through the virtual machine, is it better than running it on Windows 10? Absolutely. I would absolutely recommend this if you have the means to do it, if you're into retro gaming and you have some of the hardware. If you've got it, got it. If you want to donate, just reach out to us because it's something I would love to get my hands on. All of the other Voodoo cards I've got are AGP, and that, my friends, is a whole nother rabbit hole that I'm not quite willing to go down just yet. PCI is the way to go for now. However, that's not all I've got to show you guys, because we got so many comments from people asking about the performance of Windows 10 and possibly a Windows 98 virtual machine compared to how it would run on native hardware. So this is my Pentium 200 MMX machine that I may have mentioned in the first part, and we're going to benchmark the Voodoo 2 versus this and possibly running Windows 98 natively on the test bench system over there. But as all good things go on the internet, ladies and gents, that is a story for another day. Click a video here, or watch the first part if you haven't yet. Goodbye, hope you enjoyed the video.